Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we're going up close and personal with the Navy's next carrier, the John F. Kennedy, as she prepares to hit the water for the first time. We'll also get details on the latest F-35 deal and hear directly from Pentagon leaders about a raid that killed the leader of ISIS. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. We've got a packed show for you this week, including everything from Turkey's latest negotiations with Russia, video of a raid that killed the leader of ISIS, and we'll even go underneath an aircraft carrier. So let's get started.
Underway, shift colors!
Up first is that the carrier Gerald Ford has completed some sea trials in the Atlantic this week, which is a big deal for this ship. According to the Navy, many of those new technologies on board the Ford worked well, which is something we haven't always heard about that ship. But there's still a long road to go before she could deploy, especially as she only has 4 of her 11 weapons elevators operational. But Secretary of the Navy Richard Spencer is confident that the ship will deploy on time, so confident, in fact, that he's set his job security on it. And while the Ford was out conducting trials out of Norfolk, her sister ship, the future John F. Kennedy, hit the water for the first time, about 3 months ahead of schedule. But before the shipyard flooded that dry dock, we got a chance to head down below the ship to take a look. Here's my report.
Today we're going to flood the dock. It's the first time the ship will be in the water since we started construction in the dock in August 2015. It'll take us about 10 hours to get the water in the dock. Dock holds 160 million gallons of water, so it takes quite a while to get it in here. It's a 3-step process, so we will flood the dock to a certain level. We go in and sound tanks, and then we'll move the ship next week to the west end of the dock to get it ready to undock to go to Pier 3. Right now we're flooding dock today almost 3 months ahead of schedule. So that's a great accomplishment for our folks. It weighs right now full weight, it's estimated about 77,000 tons. It's about, we're about 1,300 tons heavier than Ford was. Indications are from the weight of the ship and the amount of outfitting we've done that we're more complete than Ford was. And that was our plan all along. We're limited in the weight in this dry dock, but however, we did a lot more work early on. Moved a lot more outfitting to the left so that we'd be in a more complete state at this point. Ford's first of a class, so there's a lot of new technologies, a lot of new components. As they've built those and tested those and worked through those issues, we've brought those lessons learned here. So a significant amount of change to improvements to how we're building the ship, to the design that are going to help us build this ship cheaper than we have on CVN-78 and do it well. And we'll deliver in June 2022.
And more than 2 years after a collision that killed 10 sailors, the destroyer John S. McCain is back at sea as it's conducting testing out of its Japanese home port. According to a Navy announcement, the ship is going to undergo significant testing of all her major systems and crew before returning to full service. The 2 collisions of the McCain and her sister ship, the Fitzgerald, rocked the Navy and have led to many changes in the forward-deployed 7th Fleet since then. And Japan has been approved by the United States State Department to upgrade 98 of its F-15J fighters to a new configuration known as the Japanese Super Interceptor. Those upgrades include a new AESA radar, advanced computers and avionics, along with new electronic warfare equipment for the jets. Work will be done in Japan at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and it could cost up to $4.5 billion. Those upgrades would also help integrate new weapons onto Japan's aircraft, such as the AGM-158 JASSM. Japan's F-15 fleet dates back to the 1980s, and it is one of the largest operators of the type outside the United States. It's also important to note that this deal's total value could change, and the upgrades still have to be approved by Congress. Turkey and Russia are in the advanced stages of negotiations to finalize a sale of Su-35 fighters, according to a senior Turkish procurement official. While final numbers may change, right now the plan is to buy 48 fighters, which would equip 2 squadrons of the Turkish Air Force. If completed, this would be the second major Turkish purchase of Russian military equipment, as they took delivery earlier this year of the S-400 air and missile defense system. Now that delivery led to Turkey being suspended from the F-35 program, which is likely why they are interested in the Su-35 in the first place. In this past weekend, the Air Force's secretive X-37B space plane landed at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, finishing a record-breaking 780 days in orbit. Now, as for what it was doing up in space, the Air Force isn't saying much, categorizing the activities as on-orbit experiments. This was the 5th mission of the X-37B, and a 6th is set to happen in 2020. And the Pentagon has announced a mammoth F-35 deal this week, which allocates $34 billion for 478 aircraft across 3 production lots. In addition, the cost per aircraft fell about 13% across all variants, which puts the price of an F-35A below $80 million a copy for the first time. The breakdown is as followed: 149 jets in Lot 12, 160 in Lot 13, and 169 in Lot 14. Those 478 total jets will go to all 3 U.S. services, as well as both program partners and foreign military sales customers. After the award was announced, Pentagon leaders briefed reporters on the deal. Here's what they had to say.
I've got a couple kind of finicky numbers questions. So if I heard you right, I think you said Lot 12 has 149 aircraft in it. Is that correct? And if so, I think the original number that was given when you guys did the handshake deal was 157 aircraft. So what's the reason for that difference? Were those the Turkey aircraft? And then secondly, you're saying that there's an average 12.8% reduction for lots 12 through 14 for all variants. And again, in the handshake deal, it was said that there would be a drop of around 15% from lot 11 to lot 14 across all variants. So is that just a non-apples to apples comparison? Can you kind of put it in context for me?
Sure. I can't address the 157 number right off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to go back into time to figure out where that number came from, and we'll circle back to you on it. Relative to the discrepancy between the 12.8% and the roughly 15% reduction that you may have heard, the air vehicle reduction from lot 11 through lot 14 for the A models was 14.4%, for the B models 15.3%, and for the C models 14.6%. When we add in the engine, the reductions for the fraction of the overall unit recurring flyaway cost that is attributable to the engine reduced at a much lower rate. So the engine rates are only down on the order of 3% between lot 11 and lot 15. So when you sum those together, it brings the overall reduction in cost at the unit recurring flyaway level across airframe and engine down to roughly 12 to 13%. That's the difference.
John?
Yes, Ms. Lord, Dr. Roper at the Air Force is pursuing something called Digital Century Series, where he thinks that in 5 years they could get an airplane of the next technological generation to outfit the Air Force. Could you explain for us how, at least for the Air Force and maybe for the other services, the F-35 buy might be modified to accommodate Digital Century Series airplanes, and how that will also be squared against the F-15EX?
We're staying the course with the F-35. I will say that Will Roper and the Air Force team are doing some very innovative and interesting things in terms of developing new fighter aircraft. We look at the total capability here versus the adversary, and we find a place for the F-35, the F-15, and the new Century series. So we continue to fight with what we have today and focus on the future and optimize what we will have for a fleet in the future, but we are taking all of this in aggregate with a mission engineering approach using all the assets we have.
So at this point, there's no revision or rethinking of the 1763 for the Air Force?
No.
Last weekend, the U.S. announced a significant win against ISIS, and its special operators took out the head of that organization, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. His death has created a vacuum at the top of the organization and comes as the U.S. is now moving into Syria to secure Kurdish oil. Late Wednesday, the head of Central Command, Marine General Frank Mckenzie, briefed reporters on what's going on.
The troops are now moving into Deir ez-Zor. Can you tell us how they are going to supplement that counter-ISIS mission and explain about how they're going to be protecting the oil?
Sure, absolutely. Let's start with ISIS. ISIS is first and last in ideology, so we're under no illusions that it's going to go away just because we kill Baghdadi. It will remain. suspect at the highest levels they'll be a little disrupted. It will take them some time to reestablish someone to lead the organization, and during that period of time, their actions may be a little bit disjointed. They will be dangerous. We suspect they will try some form of retribution attack, and we are postured and prepared to, and we're postured and prepared for that. But we should recognize that, again, since it's an ideology, you're never going to be able to completely stamp it out. And in fact, our definition of long-term success against ISIS and other entities like ISIS is not the complete absence of that ideology, but rather its existence at a level where local security forces, wherever in the world it exists, can deal with it. There's no international connective tissue. There's no ability to attack our homeland, and local forces, perhaps with training and some assistance, perhaps without those things, is going to be able to suppress those entities as they go forward. We don't see a bloodless future because, unfortunately, this ideology is going to be out there, but we think there's a way to get to a point where it's going to be less and less effective over time. So the second part of your question was about Deir ez-Zor. What we want to do is ensure that ISIS is not able to regain possession of any of the oil fields that would allow them to gain income going forward. So we've got forces at Deir ez-Zor. That is, we have brought in some reinforcements there. We'll await further decisions of the U.S. government about how that plan is going to look in the long term. And I wouldn't want to get ahead of the Secretary of Defense in describing that. But as of right now, we have secured the oil fields at Deir ez-Zor, generally east of the Euphrates River, in the vicinity of Conoco and Green Village, for those of you that follow the details on the ground.
Phil?
General, could you confirm that Baghdadi, his final moments, there was the president said that he was whimpering and crying in his final moments, and also, could you give us any better sense? You talked about a substantial electronics recovered from the site. Could you elaborate a bit on what that means?
Sure. So let me start with the second part. No, I can't tell you anything about what we took off the site. You'll appreciate that. We're going to exploit that, and we expect it to help us as we go forward. So now about Baghdadi's last moments. I can tell you this. He crawled into a hole with two small children and blew himself up while his people stayed on the ground. So you can deduce what kind of person it is based on that activity. So that would be just my empirical observation of what he did. I'm not able to confirm anything else about his last seconds. I just can't confirm that one way or another.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple's News app and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we'll sit down with Lockheed Martin's new head of Rotary and Mission Systems, Frank St. John. Lockheed Martin's Frank St. John recently moved over to head the company's Rotary and Mission Systems outfit after some time running their missiles and fire control sector. So at AUSA 2019, he and I sat down to talk about what he's planning for his new job. Frank, thanks for joining me here in the studio today to talk about some of the programs. First of all, congratulations on the move over from missiles and fire control to Rotary missions. How's the transition been, and what are you kind of learning as you come in?
Well, the transition has been, as you might imagine, pretty fast-paced. I kind of went from 0 to 60 in a couple days. The RMS portfolio is very diverse. We have things from submarines to ship combat systems to Sikorsky helicopters and air defense radars. And so it's been a great learning experience. But the one thing that's been consistent that I bring over from missiles and fire control and what I found with the team is the emphasis on the customer and the customer's mission and the shared values of doing what's right, respecting others, and performing with excellence. So even though I got new products, new customers, and a new team, in a lot of ways it's very similar to what I was doing at Missiles and Fire Control. So what are your priorities coming in at RMS? What are you looking to change? What are you looking to improve or keep things going on the path they're on? Well, a lot of things about RMS are just going fantastically. One of the things that I'm excited about is the way that we have partnered with the Army in modernizing. The Army's been very clear about their modernization priorities, and that was something we were doing at Missiles and Fire Control, and at RMS we're doing that similarly in the area of radar systems for integrated air and missile defense, as well as command and control systems, and then also future vertical lift. Our offering for FARA and FLRAA are out there, and we're very excited about taking those programs forward and bringing those to fielding with the Army. So let's jump into both of those programs right there for FARA. I mean, unveiling a Raider X this week is kind of the solution. What's that? Walk me through a little bit of Raider X and what kind of the plan is going forward for that. Okay, well, as you know, we've been working on the coaxial helo for about 8 years now. Significant investment on the part of the corporation. We kind of saw where technology was headed and began investing in that technology, as well as autonomy, open system architectures, all the things that are going to be needed to make future vertical lift fight and win in the future threat environment. And so we've been flying that aircraft for some time now. We started initially on a ground test stand, got all the dynamic components proved out before we went airborne. And we've been demonstrating superior performance with that FARA offering. And now we're looking to take the next step with the Army beginning next year and building a prototype that meets the mission requirements, as well as bringing into that all of the breadth of capability that comes with being part of Lockheed Martin. So if you think about the sensors capability that we can bring from Missiles and Fire Control, the interconnectivity and survivability we can bring from the Aeronautics Group, as well as the weapons capability from Missiles and Fire Control, all of that is part of our offering for FARA going forward.
Well, I flew the simulator last year for it here at the show, or the Raider simulator, and it was a different, unique way to fly. I enjoyed it a lot. One thing that the question though, when I see Raider and I see Raider X, is it slightly larger? What is some of the difference there?
So Raider X is about a 20% scale up from Raider, but primarily the all of the technology that's in Raider X has been proven and flight tested, and kind of the bugs wrung out of it on the basic Raider. The other thing we're doing with Raider X is we're designing it with enough margin in the power components and in the airframe, so as engine technology comes along and we can add more horsepower, which in our design translates to more speed, we'll be able to take advantage of that added engine capability.
And so what about Defiant? I know we recently saw the news that it's back up flying, its flight tests have resumed and everything like that. What's kind of the next steps for Defiant as you finish out this JRMRTD part of the program? Okay,
so Defiant is following a similar path that Raider did. We've gone through extensive testing on the ground test stand to make sure that all of the dynamic components are up and running. Now we're into our fourth flight, and that is going quite well. By the end of the year, we'll be up to 40, 80 knots. And then at the end of the first quarter, we'll be pushing the limits of the spec on the aircraft. So we'll be up in the 250, 280 flight regime. So just at the right time, as we're transitioning into the next phase of the program, we'll be demonstrating those superior handling characteristics. And it's really important on these aircraft as well, not only the speed that they can achieve, but also the ability to fly nap of the earth. Because in that future threat environment, staying low, flying fast, leveraging the autonomous capabilities of the aircraft, and keeping from being exposed to the enemy threat is going to be really critical.
So with the Army's also looking at FLRAA, which got FLRAA, FARA, all these acronyms having to do with. How are you guys looking for offering something for FLRAA? Would it be scaling up Defiant like you've done with Raider and Raider X, or what are you thinking?
Actually, the Defiant offering is very close to what we're doing for FLRAA. As you know, we've been partnered with Boeing on that for several years, and we're taking that team forward and just looking to add the same kind of mission capabilities that we're bringing to Raider X.
And so we'll talk about on the Rotary side now, on the mission system side. What are the things you guys working on for the U.S. Army, and how are things kind of going on those efforts?
Okay, so a lot of work is being done in radar systems for integrated air and missile defense. So for example, we just won the Sentinel program, which is a modern dual band capable all digital radar that is going to go towards where the Army wants to go with their vision of having every radar on a network and then having the shooters connected to that same network. So you can basically build a command and control and surveillance network with the radars, and you can bring any shooter to bear at any time. We've been doing a lot of work cross-connecting as well, missile systems from Missiles and Fire Control into Navy radar systems. So we just did a real powerful demonstration using Aegis and PAC-3, and being able to prove that we can engage with Patriot missiles, Patriot Interceptors, using Aegis Qs. And this again further disaggregates that integrated air and missile defense architecture and creates kind of a plug-and-play ability to defend any site with the interceptors.
And so I know the Army's looking to get their LTAMDS radar, so we're kind of in the source selection. How confident are you guys that you're going to be chosen there?
Well, we believe that we put in a very compelling offering on LTAMDS. We haven't heard anything official yet, and so just like any big competition, it kind of comes down to the ultimate source selection. So we're just kind of standing by to hear from the Army on that right now.
And so finally, as we wrap up, looking ahead at 2020, what are you kind of expecting RMS to go and work with on the Army? What do you see? I'm sorry, I'm going to start that question completely over. Okay. Looking ahead to 2020, what are some highlights you think we're going to see from the RMS division when it comes to working with the Army?
Well, I think some of the things you're going to see are some additional growth capabilities in Q-53 radar system. You're going to see us transition FLRAA and FARA into the next phase of development with the U.S. Army. And you're also going to see a lot of times what goes under the radar is a lot of our sustainment work and a lot of our training systems work. And we've got some new programs that we've started up with the Army, bringing data analytics and artificial intelligence into making sure that sustainment and logistics is done every bit as intelligently as flying rotorcraft and doing ground-based radar systems.
All right, Frank, thanks for the time here at the show. I know your schedule's tight, but I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And coming up, we'll talk to two of the Army's regional commanders about what's going on in both Africa and the Pacific. On this week's Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers her latest tips.
When was the last time you balanced your checkbook? Oh, right, what's a checkbook? Well then, when was the last time you checked your balance on your checking account? If you're like most people, you check it on occasion and hope for the best. But there's a better way to regain balance in your account and even in life. Budgeting by using your debit or credit card is actually a smart way to go. With cash, it can be tough to remember where your money went and how much you spent. But with a debit or credit card, you can track all of your expenses and transactions in one place. It's also an excellent way to figure out where you're potentially spending too much money. You can also set up alerts in your mobile app to help control your spending. Alerts can notify you when your balance gets too low or when you're getting close to going over budget right when you need to know it. No waiting, no guessing, no hoping for the best. If you're not already doing it, use your credit and debit cards for more than just swiping and forgetting. Take control. You've got this.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. And coming up, we're going to talk to two of the Army's regional commanders about what's going on in both Africa and the Pacific. The U.S. Army is certainly no stranger to Africa, conducting advising missions there daily. So at AUSA 2019, Jen Judson got a chance to catch up with Major General Roger Cloutier, the head of U.S. Army Africa. Here's a snippet of what they discussed.
People often ask me, why Africa matters. And I think that's one of the questions we have to answer up front. Africa is 3.5 times the size of the continental United States. It's got a population of 1.3 billion people. And by 2050, it's going to have a population of 2.4 billion. By 2050, 1 out of every 4 people in the world is going to be African. Okay. 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies there. So a stable and prosperous Africa is good for the United States national security. So with all that being said, we've got a pretty robust exercise schedule. We do an Accord series in several different countries. Last year we did Ethiopia and Rwanda. Okay. And then our flagship exercise is African Lion. It's a multi-domain exercise that takes place in Tunisia, Morocco, Senegal, that includes multiple African nations, allies and partners. It's multi-compo, so we've got all 3 components of the U.S. Army, the total forces there, and then we've got the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Special Operations Forces. So it's a chance for us to come together and do multi-domain operations that not only build tactical readiness, but strategic readiness for the Army, because it allows us to project combat power into a theater, open it, and then conduct operations.
And over in the Pacific, the U.S. Army is gearing up for some major exercises, including Defender Pacific 2020. To get more info about that effort, Jen Judson talked with the acting commander for that region, Major General Johnson.
Let's talk even bigger. You're looking at doing a big exercise, Defender Pacific in 2020, and possibly even a bigger one the following
21,
year.
Right,
yeah. So, that's going to be division level, huge. It's not something we've seen in a while, since I think maybe 1993 was the last really big exercise like this. So talk about what Army Pacific is looking at doing for Defender Pacific and why it matters, especially as the Army is looking at multi-domain operations as their new warfighting doctrine.
Right. Well, Defender Pacific is how we demonstrate to our partners and allies our commitment. It's doing that first and foremost. Secondly, it's helping improve our overall strategic readiness. You're right, it hasn't been, and I think our take is since about 1991, where we deployed a really large size force to the traditional exercise in Korea, Team Spirit.
Okay.
And so it's not easy to do. And I think our partners and allies in the region understand that. So should we ever have to go to the region to support them for whatever need, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, or any other security concerns, we need to train our Army's ability to do that. And so Defender Pacific, in large part, will force project a significant amount of force, about over 12,000 this first year, growing to over 30,000 the following year. And we anticipate this being an annual exercise, alternating between sort of a light year and a heavy year. But that force projection will teach us a lot, but will also not only demonstrate that commitment, but it'll also show that we have the ability. Should our partners and allies need our support, we can actually deliver those forces when we need to.
That's all we've got time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.